Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Asif Ali Sayed from the Department of Business Administration, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. Today, we shall be discussing about the module Role of Governance in Social Entrepreneurship of the paper Skill Development and Social Entrepreneurship. After completing this module, the students will be able to understand the theory and governance and framework of social enterprise, and they would get familiar with the dimensions and requisite skills relevant for governance in social enterprises. Introduction to governance in social enterprise. The dominant paradigm today, both in corporate management and in business education, is profit maximization and maximization of wealth of the owners. But the obsession with profit at any cost, when carried to an extreme, can lead to Enrons, WorldComs, and global trust banks, Parmaltas, and the shortening of hundreds of thousands of lives in sweatshops. Fortunately, alternatives have appeared what successfully blend concern for profits and human concerns. Today, virtually every Fortune 500 company has adopted a code of conduct and put in place the needed management structures and processes to ensure compliance. Similarly, corporate social responsibility has gathered momentum. Spirituality in management, the democratization of the workplace, including internal justice systems and good citizenship behavior in the organization, and catering to the needs of all the stakeholders, not just shareholders, are some of the other important offshoots of humane corporate management. In a developing country context in which there are so many battles to be won against poverty and deprivation, and in which a society needs to be modernized without losing track of its ethical and spiritual moorings, humane business management is a necessity. Governance issues which should be addressed include what human alternatives there are to mindless commercialism and how to manage each alternative without loss of profitability, how to enrich business practices, and what we teach in business schools with these new paradigms of management. The salient features of these responses are as follows. The globalized strategy of a few powerful nations has robbed country after country of its right to choose its own path, not only economic but cultural as well, with the new milieu verging on in the inhumane practice. An immense effort is necessary to nourish human values as the cause and ethical conduct as the consequence. Cooperative enterprises or new workers' enterprises can provide the organizational means whereby a significant proportion of humanity takes on the task of creating productive employment and overcoming poverty, thus achieving social integration without placing undue importance on the interests of capital providers. Enduring companies have demonstrated that by simultaneously attending to a variety of stakeholders and focusing on composite goals rather than profit maximization alone, it is possible to acquire and maintain industry leadership. Firms need to move from a feudal relationship with their business partners to a strategic partnership and invest more in hygiene factors and human resource development for long-term employee satisfaction, performance, and development. The need is to evolve through dialogue among businessmen, government, and civic society a consensus on what the social responsibility of business is and what are legitimate and illegitimate actions. Introduction to the corporate social responsibility and stakeholders. Corporate social responsibility is essentially a concept whereby companies integrate social and environmental concerns in their business operations and in their interaction with their stakeholders on a voluntary basis. This means not only fulfilling legal expectations but also going beyond compliance and investing in human capital and environment and relations with stakeholders. The development of CSR or corporate social responsibility reflects the growing expectations of the community and stakeholders about the evolving role of companies in society and the responses of companies to growing environmental, social and economic pressures. Through voluntary commitment to CSR, companies are hoping to send a positive signal of their behavior to their various stakeholders, which is employees, shareholders, investors, consumers, regulators, NGOs and the government, and in doing so make an investment in their future and help to increase profitability. Many driving forces are fostering the evolution of corporate social responsibility, such as new concerns and expectations from citizens, consumers, public authorities and investors in the context of globalization and large-scale industrial change. Social criteria are increasingly influencing the investment decisions of individuals and institutions, both as consumers and as investors. Increased concerns about the damage caused by economic activity to the environment and transparency of business activities brought about by the media and modern information and communication technology. CSR at present is mainly driven by large or multinational companies that rely extensively on their public reputation for continued viability. The systematic implementation of CSR involves the use of the following features. First, adoption of strong organizational values and norms justifying as to which behaviors are appropriate towards a variety of stakeholders. Second, continuous generation of intelligence about stakeholders' issues along with positive responses to these issues. Justification of CSR. Social scientists have formulated several theories that justify the importance of corporates engaged in promoting social welfare of the society in which they operate. These theories are as follows. The first is the trusteeship model. This model adopts a realistic perspective of the corporations as a social institution with a corporate personality. The trusteeship model differs from the agency model in two ways. First, the fiduciary duties of the trustees is to sustain the corporation's assets, including not only the shareholders' wealth, but also the broad stakeholders' value, such as the skills of the employees, the expectations of the customers and suppliers, and the company's reputations in the community. The second is the social entity theory. The social entity conception of the corporation regards the company not as a private association united by individuals' property rights, but as a public association constituted through political and legal processes and as a social entity for pursuing collective goals with public objectives. Third is the pluralistic model. It supports the idea of multiple interests of stakeholders rather than shareholders' interests alone. It argues that the corporation should serve and accommodate wider stakeholders' interest in order to make the corporation more efficient and legitimate. The scope of social responsibility. The scope of social responsibility is wide and could be considered in terms of different viewpoints, some of which are listed as follows. First, protecting and promoting stakeholders' interest. Second, social concern and promotion of common welfare programs. Third, as an act of philanthropy. Fourth, good corporate governance itself is a social responsibility. Fifth, corporates in the vanguard of rendering social service. Sixth, sponsoring social and charitable causes. Seventh, corporations should supplement state efforts. Eighth, social responsibility of corporates also lies in abiding by rules and regulations. Ninth, ensuring ecological balance. And tenth, by focusing on human elements. Theory of governance and social enterprise. The current discussion is structured in three parts. 1. New public management and governance. Second, democratization and civil society. Third, social enterprise, an actor of the public space. The first part refers to the contemporary society dilemma between preserving a state republican theory and a trend to consider the state as a superpower for coordinating the public policies as a whole. The comparison between the modern bureaucratic principle and the new public management reveals a new development paradigm named also as 3 E's. These 3 E's would mean economy, efficiency, and efficacy, as stated by Rhodes 1997, with specific features: the introduction of the private sector management into the public sector, active citizenship, professional management, explicit standards and performance measures, results-based management, and value versus money. The state restructuring, Europeanization, and globalization processes are in strong correlation with the governance concept. The concept occurs in the same time with the diagnosis of the government's incapacity to respond to problems and to adapt to the new ways of social, economic, and political organizations, taking into consideration the fact that the traditional governance makes use of power as a tool and it is based on command and control networks. The literature refers to governance networks as models established by social relations between interdependent actors formed around the politics and or political programs. The governance concept is synonymous to the network management concept. The second part analyzes the democratization concept in connection with the development of global political economy and the economic liberalization and the state's institutional change and the development of a powerful civil society. The third part analyzes the thematic of social enterprise as a new actor within the governance's public space. This concept is framed within the trend of adopting new business methods for the market economy. New public management and governance. For contemporary society, a dilemma is between maintaining a republican theory of state, a public thing which is more than the amount of groups of institutions and agents that form it, although it is formed of different games, in conformity to the essence of public policies and the current trends to see in a state of superposition without coordination of the public politics conceives as a whole. So many games subject to the paradox of unwanted consequences and mainly as actions without authors, since they are made based on actions with multiple scopes, as stated by Allison in 1972. The state wouldn't build collective preferences by adjusting the sectoral segments to a global one, but it would be actually lacked of any responsible will, since subjects to some global constraints on which it could not have any influence, it would reduce to a mix of incremental adjustments where everybody would control and no one would be responsible, as stated by Lika in 2006. Let's remember the traditional model of public sector promoted by Max Weber by determining the principles of modern bureaucracy where public interests and private interests are completely separated. The bureaucracy characteristic to modern Occidental states, also called the chain of parliamentarian government, also in 1978, is a neutral tool that applies the law. The USV Annals of Economic and Public Administration, Volume 14, Issue 220, 2014-2006, as adopted by the Parliament and political decisions taken by government. The Kaiser, 2004. The reforms of public sector or the administrative reform presents few defining elements for the new public management, such as deliberate changes of public bureaucracies. It is synonymous with innovation. The anticipated results of reforms processes consists in improving the efficiency of public services. The utility of reforms is explained by the need to deal with incertitude and fast changes from the organizational environment, as quoted by Turner and Hulme 1997. The concept of good governance introduced by World Bank is closely related to the concept of democratization and signifies responsibility, transparency, receptivity, a strong civil society, and a correct governing. For Hayden, governance is conscious management of the regime structures with a view to consolidate the legitimacy of public space. As quoted by Hayden 1992, the governance space has four characteristics. First, authority, related to legitimate power. Reciprocity is a form of social interaction that generates new forms of consensus related to the basic rules of the politics. Third, personal trust between different groups and public authorities. Fourth, responsibility as a form of receptivity of public authorities towards the citizens and manners how the citizens may make liable the public authorities. Again, quoted by Hayden 1999. The concept of governance includes trust and reciprocity outlining in the conception of Hayden the importance of social capital and of the institutions of civil society in legitimizing of public space. Perspectives on governance for social response. In the 18th century, Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, two utilitarian philosophers, enunciated the ethics of the greatest goods of the greatest number. Adam Smith, a philosopher of morality and economics, came up with the idea that the greatest good of the greatest number is effectively served by the invisible hand of self-interest. Alfred Marshall and other economists refined Smith's idea into an economic theory that argued that under competitive conditions, profit maximization by firms leads to the most efficient allocation of resources, lower prices than under monopoly, and larger aggregate output than under monopoly. Such excellent theoretical results elevated profit maximization to an academic cult. On the foremost exponent of this cult is Milton Friedman of the University of Chicago. He once boldly proclaimed, "There is one and only one social responsibility of the business, to use its resource and engage in activities to increase its profit." Friedman 1962. Later, he relented a little by accepting that profit maximization should be attempted within a legal framework and subject to broad social ethical norms. Friedman 1970. Profit and wealth maximization has become a business cult as well. Kennedy 2000. Executive compensation schemes through stock options have bolstered this profit and wealth maximization cult. Professor Chakrabarty has long been a votary of spirituality in management. His piece, sharply polemical, is From the Heart. In the climate of globalization, WTO and hyper competition, it is, he says, pointless to talk of humane management because the mindset of bottom line maximization converts all noble initiatives into instrumentalities. One of the chief, though unrecognized, difficulties in the way of business or management ever reviving humaneness is its penchant for instrumentalization, thereby trivializing every ennobled or uplifting ideal. For example, ethics is good because it is good business. Ethics is not its own justification. Presumably, managers need to get spiritual first before they can contemplate humane management. As he puts it, let us learn to sit before wishing to walk or run. Dr. Varghese Kurian, considered by many to be the father of India's white revolution, excoriates greedy commercialization or profit maximization at any costs. He discusses three value orientations: the egocentric perspective that argues that what is in the interest of the individual is in the interests of the society; the social altruistic perspective which tries to promote the greatest good of the greatest number; and the ecocentric perspective that emphasizes conservation, thrift and stability. He advises management professions can be beneficial in the long run only if they can shed their narrow loyalties. He advises management professions can be beneficial in the long run only if they can shed their narrow loyalties to shareholders and recognize their obligations to strive for larger social good without undermining social harmony and ecological balance. He believes that the cooperative form of organization is best suited to avoid the excesses of egocentrism and greedy profit maximization. As he puts it, cooperative enterprises constitute a model for the people-centered and sustainable form of societal organizations based on equity, justice and solidarity. Dr. Mrityunjay Arthreya, a former academician who turned into a leading management consultant, traces the roots of business misconduct to profit obsession. He calls for a stakeholders model of management in which the management acts as a trustee for all the stakeholders. Listing of companies on stock exchanges has led to short-term attempts at maximizing EPS, that is earning per share, and PE ratios, and this harms the long-term interests of the companies through neglect of research and development, training, customer care, employee engagement, ecology and ethics. So, balance needs to be restored. He calls for a stronger customer orientation, a stronger HRD and employee satisfaction emphasis, a strategic partnership with the vendors and dealers, and greater corporate social responsibility and corporate philanthropy. He calls for enlightened self-analysis. As he says, the motto should be where society thrives, business flourishes. Professor Anil Gupta, equally well known as an academic and as an activist champion of the intellectual property rights of rural innovators, points to the highest prevalence of bad business behavior, but also to the fact that there are corporations with a social conscience that are able to generate for themselves substantial social capital or goodwill through their benevolent activities. He identifies several opportunities for collaboration between the corporate sector and the social and small enterprise sector. He calls for the new social contract between the small sector and the corporate sector. He says the new paradigm based on incorporating social capital in the analysis of corporate purpose and profits does not see the social sector as a sink of resources. On the contrary, the social sector, including small enterprises, is seen as the source of innovations, creativity, values and perspectives that can improve motivation and efficiency even in the corporate sector. Summary. Let us have a brief review of what we have discussed so far. Corporate social performance is desirable in its own right, but even in corporate business performance terms, the research to date indicates that corporate social performance is generally positively associated with business performance, as quoted by Griffin and Mahon 1997, but it can extract a fearful cost, especially in societies where ethical, legal structure and governances are weak. In these societies, millions of workers work in sweatshops in which frequent diseases, subsistence, wages and accidents shorten life. Bribing government officials to evade taxes or get favor is rampant. Share prices are manipulated through insider trading. Lethal pollutants are dumped into rivers, lakes, wells and air. Shoddy, frequently harmful products are palmed off to unsuspecting customers. Competitors are driven off from the market through underhand means. Non-unionized employees are laid off at the whims of owners, depriving families of livelihood. The solutions to extending these type of maladies and extending social responsibilities by the corporate lies in the governance. Also, corporate social performance has been found to reduce the riskiness of the firms. Orlitz and Benjamin 2001. By raising the returns on investment and by reducing risks, corporate social responsibility practices may raise the stock market valuation of the company and therefore contribute to the maximization of the wealth of the investors also. Thank you.